You're listening to Eye on the Market Backstory with David O. England. This week's Eye on the Market Backstory from David's column. We're back on cannabis again. Cannabis companies up in smoke. This is part 2. You had a quote in your column, "Time is your friend, impulse is your enemy," again from John Bogle. So why did you pick that one?
First of all, I have a lot of respect for John Bogle, founder of the Vanguard Group and these kinds of things. And this quote, I always like to have some kind of a quote to leave people thinking. Time's your friend, impulse is your enemy. Well, some people would just went ahead and bought a lot of cannabis companies on impulse. They saw the increased demand. They saw the number of states that's making this legal, medicinal, and also recreational. And by the way, once again, we got a lot of good feedback from last week's column. And some of it kind of hit a nerve with people. Remember, folks, I'm just talking about the market side of this. And I'm not answering questions on the ethics or these kinds of things. I'm answering questions on the market side. But it's definitely getting people's attention, needless to say. But impulse is your enemy. That's one thing people just bought in thinking that it's going to be profitable. Yes, it's good to buy companies that you may know, but I'll also add, but they also need to be profitable or soon to be profitable. So time is your friend. Let's identify the funds like we did last week and these companies like we're doing today, and then let's watch them and let's see when they start to pop from a bottom. And then at that point in time, only if you're going to get into this industry, take a look at considering then a buy or these kinds of things.
So here's the question. Why these companies?
Okay. Once again, the analytics. We're going to crunch the numbers. Takes a lot of money to go in and see out of the 200 or 300 companies that are in these sectors, which one the big money is going to, the institutions, although they aren't there yet because we don't have the volume. So what we did is we found out last week the symbol MJ is the ETF that's the largest. So then what I do this week, I go in and find out the top holdings that's in MJ. Those are Canopy Growth, Kronos, GW Pharmaceuticals, Tilray, and Aurora Cannabis, and APHRIA. And then I go in and track the performance of those since 2017 to date, and then also the performance of those top companies. Now, there's many to track, but for some reason, the fund managers decided to put these as their top holdings, and they did that because they spent tens of thousands of dollars on research. So I'm not going to recreate the wheel. I'm going to go with what they have, what they put their money on. And so those are why I track. Now, as far as the charts go, I could track 20, but you couldn't read them, so I'm going to focus on the top 5 or 6.
So what are they? Again, what are we looking at here?
The Canopy Growth, Kronos, GW Pharmaceuticals, Tilray, and Aurora. And for people that see the chart, they can see where CRON jumped up and had over a 1,900% run from the beginning of 2017. Now, that doesn't mean that people bought it back then, but it had a heck of a run. But if they didn't have a system that told them it was to sell, it jumped from a 1,900% return all the way down to a 500.
Wow.
Yeah, that got my attention. So there are some companies in this group that have been extremely profitable. But, Tom, once again, we don't just go with one time frame. We always have a confirmation time frame. I know it's a little extra work, but hey, that's what we do to get the job done. So then I also in the column have the chart that shows the micro. The macro is the long term. Micro, just think microscope. These are economic terms. And take a look at, what's the performance since 2019? And when people see that chart, they see that all of these are underperforming the market. And the majority of these companies are still underperforming the market by 10, 20, 30, 60, or even 70%. That's the dangerous thing, because some of those listeners have some of these stocks that even though fundamentally they look like they're going like gangbusters, but the profitability is not there. And once again, a lot of it has to do with it's not legal from a federal standpoint, although with some states, and more states are going to come on board after, not the ethics of it, but for the profitability and the taxes. That's for a different subject matter. But these are the types of things that we look at. And by the way, Tom, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had money come into some of these. Now, is it going to last? I don't know. It'd be interesting to watch. But so far, in the last, since 2019, they have not been profitable from an investing standpoint, and that's what I focus on.
Another thing, too, we're talking about these companies. And so you mentioned one that had, I would say, did it have good returns if I had been in that a little bit earlier, and which companies maybe had the best returns? Can we go specifically back into figuring
Yes.
that out?
CRON is still up 675% since, once again, it ran to 1900 and now it's down about 695. And then some of these others are still, WEED has still been profitable. But the rest of these, and GWPH is still 6% return since that time frame. The rest in this group have negative returns.
There is a part of this industry that there are things that maybe you want to look at
Yes.
to invest in or to be a part of. What are those? What are we looking at? What other than just the manufacturer, but are there any things behind the scenes that are making a difference?
Well, Tom, tune in next week.
Is that where
And
we're gonna
those
get
are the
that?
companies, part 3, are going to be the legal companies that supply things in the cannabis industry that there's no holdbacks on buying them. And those are the ones that I have the most interest in. Now, okay, I'll answer your question. The companies that possibly may sell fertilizer for this industry, the companies that are going to be, and I think one of the largest industries, the breathalyzers. Imagine when they get the technology perfected. It's not there yet, but I'm watching some of the companies. I just tune in next week, read the column, listen to our podcast. Imagine once it's mandated that when the technology is there, how many police departments, local, state, and federal will be mandated to have breathalyzers in those vehicles, because look at all the money they're missing out on right now. Breathalyzers in those vehicles that can prove that somebody has THC in their blood.
Wow.
Those are the companies that get me excited, man.
Okay, so that's going to be our part 3.
Part
in this
3.
thing about cannabis.
Yes.
It's coming up. Now, for more information, or if you would like to contact David O. England about this column, his latest column, or any others, you can email thetraderseye@gmail.com or find David O. England on Facebook. And we do want to remind you this presentation is for educational purposes only and is not intended as a recommendation to buy or sell any securities mentioned in our discussion.
Tom, don't forget, plan your work your plan, and most important, share your harvest.